So what we have here is a chain of cute small islands below North America. And here we have very similar cute small islands below South America. Can it really be a coincidence? They even seem to be the same number. And as if that is not enough, in both cases we see straight lines at the exactly same positions, as if huge bulldozer made both of them. So this is the necklace of islands. This is the line. And here, if we zoom in, we see strange stuff on the ocean bottom. And if this is a true radar image, here we have even the traces of those excavators or bulldozers which made this plateau, underwater plateau. But of course it doesn't look like a real radar image. It looks like this entire area has been selected here. Yes, this has been selected. And after that, some sort of distortion tool has been applied here. Means they want to hide something. So it may not be necessarily excavator marks, but probably there is something suspicious next to this regularly shaped plateau. So this episode will be about various curious features of the landscape of both Americas, which I find it's extremely hard to call natural, at least in the sense of the word that most people accept nowadays. Of course, if we take that Mother Nature means a highly intelligent being who has created this environment for us, then I can accept it. But still, most likely, there were other beings helping as well, and probably many of them throughout the ages. So the face of the Earth here in Alaska appears as if it has been scraped by very furious winds. But then when we start looking at the details, it turns out that these winds were also kind of scooping the earth, so they were not winds after all. And it even looks like as if the same gigantic scoop was grabbing earth again and again. Please ensure that you are watching this episode in HD resolution and full screen, otherwise many of the details will not be visible. Now let's see various images from North America, which appear to be quite curious. This mysterious line, is this a canal or what? It is definitely intelligent design, but it goes from nowhere to nowhere, goes across flowing rivers without a bridge, so it really seems to be historic, this line, and yet below it we're gonna see modern infrastructure partially maybe related to an old earth dam. Very weird, very weird. Now, Nazca-style lines are found all over both Americas. Occasionally, they also form pictures, maybe not as artistically sophisticated as the monkeys and spiders at Nazca, but definitely the grid line is the same. Basically, the grid continues throughout the two continents and, as we're gonna see in the future episodes, all over the full planet. Very often the modern infrastructure is built on places, junctions of this old grid. For example, here the thick line is 100 meters wide. So these are not small things. Again, we see some piece of modern infrastructure on it. Or it could be that also some of the lines are not even old. Maybe they still build them because they know how the grid functions and how to use it. But of course, the common people don't know. Remains of an ancient dam out there in the desert now. But this has been a river once upon a time, and at that time there were people who were building dams. Again, interesting, where the plateau has eroded all around, there are no lines, but where the old surface has survived, there are lines. A modern airport. But has it been built on the remains of an older structure? This is the old. Probably the old terminals were here. Is this another old runway that didn't get a modern airport made on it? The width of the runway here is some 20 meters. And again, so many dams on a river that no longer exists. They are over a kilometer long, each of them. We see some complex, also maybe they were built over time as the river was getting smaller and smaller or something like that. dams. Some figure here. Well, apparently the people who were building these dams lived on the area for a long time, because this is when the river was later on much smaller. They built a smaller dam. Again, the lines connected to the dams. The lines here are 20 meters wide. If we assume that the lines were drawn when the river didn't exist at all, then the line building must have been, and dam building must have been going on for a long time as the climate was changing. This cannot be streets, such complicated wide boulevards where nobody has lived for ages. Again, out there, nowhere, really in a deserty place, some sort of traces of who has been doing something here. And you can find thousands of similar examples yourself, probably even much more interesting than the ones I'm showing you. How to find them? Just open any satellite map. Look for regions that are less populated, especially the deserty regions, and you will be finding lots of stuff. This is in the very cold parts of Canada. The lines seem to be partially submerged. Now, if somebody still doubts that some of these lines could be done by the forestry department to keep inventory of the forests, for example, here it transpires that this can't be the case, because would they be transporting heavy equipment to each and every tiny flooded island in this swampy area just to cut a small part of the line? Not also making the grid will be quite difficult. The lines are meters wide. We often see that even they are full of water. And they would also need maintenance as well. These are some photos of them taken from a low-flying airplane. Again, this is in North America. If we want to understand the Nazca lines, we have to study them in their entirety, the entire network all over the world, and not only on the Nazca Plateau. A giant Sri mandala in Oregon, 20 kilometers long. Now, these are images mostly from California, some from Florida as well. Officially, these are areas which have never been inhabited. Some of them are parts of what is officially called pristine nature reserves. But then who dug out the grid lines again? And also, do you notice the dots along the lines? I have no clue what that is, but similar dots are found as part of geoglyphs in South America, the area of Titicaca, I believe. Actually, the parts of this grid which are not flooded are repopulated again, and the parts of the modern cities are built on the top of the old infrastructure. This is one of the most puzzling photos for me. These are these very same areas with the flooded canals, and we see these are like old electricity poles. Yeah, looks like that. So then the question arises, is this obviously damaged grid of canals still in use when there was electricity already? Well, that's very recent. I mean, mass usage of electricity, that's pretty modern. And if not, what are these poles anyway? Was there another electricity? I mean, another electric grid with electricity before the one we know of? There are speculative theories along those lines. Now let's have a look at the elongated, supposedly natural spits of Alaska. Starting somewhere here, the full coastal line appears to be intelligently manipulated all the way to here and possibly even much further. This is the official explanation of how these spits came to be. Dominant waves approach from the northwest, creating elongated spit. Okay, so that's the theory. Now let's look at the reality, the photographs. First of all, besides the fact that the spits look a little bit too elegant, stretching over many thousands of kilometers, to be purely natural, meaning appearing only driven by the force of the tides and waves, but also at places where there is no spit and the coastline meets the ocean directly, we have also a very, very regular shape. We can't blame these precise lines again on the currents and waves, because those tend to cause erosion on the coast, leaving behind a shaggy-looking edge. Coast, I mean. Of course, not always. Sometimes even the forces of the winds and the waves can produce very regular-looking coastal lines, but those are relatively short stretches. The stretches here are not only thousands of kilometers long, but also they beautifully fit the design of the spits. And there is yet another feature of this elegant looking coastal line of Alaska, which might be able to give us a clue as artificial origin of all this coastal line artwork, I would say. And that's what looks like partially submerged harbors. Now, something that looks like a harbor and an actual proven harbor are different things, but I think we have a good chance to have real harbors because a man called John Jensen studied similar looking ruins on the more densely populated coastal parts of America and discovered a good number of massive old ports, which not only seem to be submerged and destroyed to an extent exactly as this spit in Alaska and the ruins around it, but also the ports that he studied are connected with the same grid of lifelines that I've been showing you in Alaska. Do you see the regularly shaped submerged canal? This is not modern. We have inherited this from the people that I call survivors, and he calls them the ancient canal builders, but these are the very same people. The work of John Jensen is really amazing because one thing is to see some underwater channels on photograph, and something else is to become aware of their actual size and dimension. These are truly colossal projects, as he calls them. He also calculated how much would it cost to build some of them in modern currency, and it amounts to hundreds of millions of dollars. As the Amazon forest is being cut down, geoglyphs, which were formerly covered with vegetation and thus invisible, now become visible. It's quite a few of them, and the size is sometimes quite impressive, reaching the height of over 20 meters. Quickly, the geoglyphs were declared a mystery because you see, the population in the past in the Amazon jungle was minimal, so there couldn't have been a civilization to build them, right? It turns out that the last piece of information about the population of the Amazon basin is yet another modern historical fantasy. Even a short couple of hundred years ago, the information in the history books was much more truthful. There were quotes with what the first explorers saw there. As they were traveling with their boats, the banks of the rivers were black with people. It was so densely populated. Those explorers also reported that the natives had very orderly social structure and lived in beautiful cities. And since we are looking at the aerial images in this video, there are strange things underwater as well. But let alone are they historical, do they even exist? Because all the images we get are digital composite images, means photoshopped, but photoshopped what, a real image or fantasy, or what somebody told you to make look like real. In reality, we have more or less satisfactory images taken from the height of an airplane only of the densely populated areas on Earth. About every